Alright, Q&A number 14, here we go. First question from Darth Sonic 4135. Good to see you again. Q&A: how would the Tau initially react if a great displacement had plopped them in the middle of a Jedi Civil War instead of a Clone Wars? Only their initial reaction, not asking you to write a new series. Thank you for that. I think the general first reaction would be, ah shit, here we go again. A bit less grim, but still dark galaxy with some crazy Sith people. Their initial reaction would be quite basic. Same shit, different galaxy. There isn't really much more to say outside of the fact that they would have much easier time establishing their power in the Outer Rim than in the current timeline. The next question is quite similar and comes from Xeragusta. Q&A: how would the Tau react if they were displaced into a Pius Dea era? And once again, the main answer remains, ah shit, here we go again. And once more, this setting would be easier than 40k timeline, than current Clone Wars era, and probably easier than the civil war among the Jedi and Sith, yeah? Because you see, the Pius Dea sure were dangerous, but they also held far less amount of control over the Outer Rim. I mean, they lacked anything compared to the Imperium of Man, like Space Marines, Titans, Knights. Hell, they didn't really had that much of a support in terms of Jedi, so they didn't even have that many Force users on their side. Sure, they were some, but they were few in number. Most importantly, we know that the Pius Dea attempted and failed to defeat the Hutts. Hell, with how different the Hutt Empire is to the Hutt cartels, I think that in this era, in this scenario, Tau and the Hutts would actually team up. And if they did, expect counter-crusades. Now that would be fun. Hell, seeing how days of Pius Dea are very much numbered, this scenario is probably the best for the future development and potential of power of a Tau. Probably not the answer you people expected, huh? Okay. Next question from... oh, Beelzebub on the freaking pogo stick. How do you even pronounce that? She's Scare 54? I think? Anyway, Q&A. What biologists of the Skyriver Galaxy would think of Eldar, Tau, Orc and Tyranid biologies? Quite simple question, really. I will not go into detail because the discussion of biology of each of those races could take entire video of their own, but in terms of Tau, Tau are nothing special by Star Wars standards. Well, with one exception being their total lack of Force sensitivity. That's like the only thing that is special about them. In every other aspect, by Star Wars standards, Tau aren't special. The Eldar are both as super Force-sensitive species, but also how their longevity. I do not believe that there are many species in the Skyriver Galaxy that could match the Eldar's, long lifespan. Not that and their amazing psychic abilities. And that's not going into more unique and intriguing quirks of their biology. Orcs would be scary because their biology in many ways breaks all conventions. As the Tau explained in the second episode, I believe, the orcs would be recognized as a rogue bioweapon created by a civilization that was capable of apparently making a species that breaks laws of physics. So they would be very confusing, and it would take a bit for the scientists of Star Wars to even begin to catalog or accept the reality-bending abilities of the orcs. The Tyranids are terror incarnate, because all of them are bioengineered monstrosities. The fact that it's not really a single species, but a single organism, that would terrify the scientists of the Sky River Galaxy to no end. But yeah, that's about it. I won't be going into too much more detail because it would take far too long to discuss every quirk and detail. Okay, next question from Seiden Heiter. Hello. Q&A. While we know that the transported psychers, like Magmar, still have their full capabilities, we haven't seen any Jedi use anything beyond their normal abilities, like should be able to, since the warp and force were made of the same for the story reasons. Is it because they can't, or are they just not aware that they can? Do they know and have a law banning it, safety reasons, not to use such an obvious power source? Okay, first of all, warp and the force being the same doesn't mean that the Jedi have access to the warp. My interpretation is that force and the warp both are seas of souls, so they have similar nature, which is why I decided that both psychers and force-sensitive people can take power from the same source, or the source that have same nature, or, well, core nature, because the warp, as the name suggests, is far more chaotic, unstable, and overall the access to this power is easier but also more dangerous, which is why some psychers, if they use power, you know, their heads explode or turn into a rift for demons to pass through. The Force is also a sea of souls, just like the warp, however it is far more stable, so it takes more skill to take this power and manifest it. It's been mentioned in the story before that the Psychers did experience changes in how their abilities manifest and how they take power from the other side, if you will. As to general powers, do not underestimate different force abilities of the Sky River Galaxy. Because in Star Wars there are many force abilities that have very similar look and power output to that of Psychers in Warhammer 40k. It's that other organizations, other than the Jedi Order, use them. Witches of Dathomir are not unique in their unconventional use of the Force. And you must realize that the Jedi are aware of many of those techniques and abilities, but because of their code, their culture, and other elements, they focus on other abilities. Mainly foresight, which helps them deflecting incoming shots and detecting threats. Another is mind control, another is telekinesis, which is obvious, and strengthening and boosting your own physical body. And if you read the books, you can find that they have many other interesting abilities, like for example, ability to become basically invisible to all observers. The Chosen One, the Anakin Skywalker, stated that once he used this ability without knowing that he was using it as a child to make himself and his speeder not perceived by his opponents as he was pod racing, which apparently scared the ever-loving shit out of one of the contestants, which caused him to, well, crash and die. So yeah, that's one of the more unique Jedi abilities that we don't really see in, movies. I do remember a comic where a Jedi quite literally consumed a fire of a gigantic explosion to save their comrades. A fire eater, that Jedi was called. I can't remember the details now. It was, goddamn, it was a very old comic. But I remember that detail quite well enough. So you have, for example, in this case, fire absorption. Ability to absorb energy of an explosion. That's not nothing. That's quite impressive ability, all things considered. So don't sell the Jedi short just because their more common techniques might seem basic. It's not that they aren't versatile or that the Jedi do not possess more interesting, powerful and unique abilities that they can and do call upon. Okay, next question from Juan Pablo Arroyo Ave 5583. Oh, hello again. Q&A. Assuming the Tau don't annex the Imperial worlds, or they somehow keep Tau overworlds, do you think that they would be Imperial citizens who would defect to the Galactic Empire? If they can, and if so, how do you think the Empire would react to such a thing? I highly doubt the Imperial worlds will last to the Empire forming, but it's an interesting thought. A fun question. Starting with, do not sell remnants of the Imperium of Man short. Some of them have a solid chance of surviving for quite a while. But focusing on the core question, hard to answer, honestly. Mostly because of ideological differences, and they are stark. Citizens of the Imperium of Man are extremely religious, especially by the Star Wars standards, while Galactic Empire is overall secular. Which is ironic, all things considered. Because, the Emperor of Mankind tried to create a secular Imperium because of his belief, or, well, lack of belief in gods, while Sheev Palpatine is the head of a religious, dark Force user order. So that's one cute little irony. And still, the Galactic Empire is overall secular in nature. Sure, they are human supremacists, and they are not really kind to different aliens or Xenos, but it's hard to tell what percentage of people of the Imperium of Man would be convinced to join secular Galactic Empire. Some would, but definitely not an easy sell. The Galactic Empire would be, in their eyes, full of, heretics and heathens, so yeah, not an easy sell, Okay, next question from Mountain Man H2E. Q&A, are the Tau's weird Smurf names just their meaning being translated into English and therefore just names of a different tongue, or are they actually called stuff like blue light, blue plus light? Mate, you do realize that the good portion of names we have a meaning, right? Like last name Smith. My gods, I wonder what was their ancestor profession. As for the first names, here are some examples. Oliver and Olivia comes from literal olive. Theodore means gift of God. Henry, home ruler. William is composed of words willow, meaning desire, and helm, meaning protection. Stefan means crowned. I'm sorry to pop your bubble, mate, but basically all of us, which includes you, have Smurf names. Look, I know you asked this question with intention of rage bait or trolling, so I do apologize that I had to bring you down back to Earth and make you realize that Tau names and our names are not that different from one another. I mean, you would find that if you spent all of 2 minutes of research on Google. Please do look up the meaning behind your first and last name and then consider what kind of Smurf you are. Okay, next question from Lipe-san. Oh, hello again. Q&A, are you familiar with Warhammer 40k Gladius? If so, what do you think of the game's Tau campaign? Okay, I played Gladius because I love RTS, and you know, RTS 40k game with a Tau faction. Holy hell, that's something for me. And it's not a fun game. And I do mean generally, not just campaign and overall. The gameplay and narrative is just stale. I won't spoil it for everyone else, but the plot for basically every faction that I played, including Tau, is a total mess. And the gameplay is, again, very repetitive and not that interesting or satisfying. If you played one campaign, you more or less played them all. And with Gladius, in terms of the Tau campaign, buying into Phil Kelly way of writing, not to mention doing things that are dumber than what he wrote down, is beyond disappointing. Yes, I will say it with my whole chest. Phil Kelly, the writer that I hate with a passion, wrote better stories than whatever the hell was the Tau campaign in Gladius. So if you are wondering if you should buy this game, don't. Just don't. Okay, next question from Tiago Emilo 7204. Q&A. The Jedi know the Tau and their allies refer to the Force as the Warp, so are the Tau hiding warp travel from the Republic as a way to keep an advantage? No. The Tau didn't hide the existence of the warp drive. But it's also true that the Tau are not using proper warp drive themselves, and no Jedi ever yet experienced warp translation themselves. They are not fully aware of what it means. Also with, you know, quite stark difference between the Force and the Warp, and the very idea of traveling through it, the Jedi do not yet fully understand that yes, the ships equipped with a warp drive are capable of punching through reality and going into the Force, if you will. Additionally, warp drive isn't much of an advantage for the Tau, mostly because, again, they don't really use it. Their allies, the Krut, some Gwevesa forces like the Black Thorns, and few others do use them, but it's not that popular in the Commonwealth. More importantly, every FTL form from Warhammer 40k is generally slower than hyperdrive. Look, with a navigator, a warp drive equipped vessel can go about as fast as a civilian craft with a hyperdrive, and even then they do not get the boost of speed of using major hyperlanes. Sure, the warp drives have some advantages, including not need of using, mapped hyperlanes, but if you are wondering that, oh, if Tau are hiding it to have an advantage, no, mostly because it simply isn't, and the factions of Star Wars Galaxy wouldn't be really interested in possessing a warp drive. It's too dangerous and too expensive to make, not to mention that you need a relatively big vessel by Star Wars standards to even use it. Like a vessel under a 1 kilometer long possessing a warp drive, that's rare, very rare, almost unheard of. You need to 1.5 kilometer and up to house a warp drive. So not really cost effective for Star Wars factions. Anyway, next question. From Grand Contingency Coalition. Neat name. Okay, Q&A. How bad of a diplomatic incident would occur when inevitably someone from the Sky River Galaxy treats an Iron Ken as a droid? Not as big as you might think. Remember that the Ken did conduct business with the Imperium and other factions while hiding true intelligence of the Iron Ken. So the Iron Ken were, being ignored and not taken seriously, that's one thing. So, not really a problem if the Iron Ken are, just ignored or not taken seriously by people of the Sky River Galaxy. That's one layer. However, if someone tried to buy Iron Ken or abuse Iron Ken, thinking there will be no consequences at all, well, that's a grudge, and the space dwarfs will collect appropriate payment for such a slight. Okay, next question from TyrannifeX01. Q&A. Will the Eldar find their way into places like the world between worlds to make up for their loss of the Webway? No. Hell no. Absolutely, positively, impossibly not. I am not. No way, no how, no why. Bring that stupid ass, brain rotten, Filoni ex machina concept into my story. Absolute nope. Screw that concept, screw that idea, and screw Filoni for coming up with this bullshit. World Between Worlds introduced so much. You know what? No, I am not going to spend next 5 hours raging against how fucking dumb that whole idea is. In short, in one sentence, it's, as I said, Deus Ex Machina. It's a lore breaker machine, continuity breaker machine. I work very hard to make my story and the world I create, even in this crossover, somewhat cohesive. World Between Worlds is basically the tool to break cohesion of a story, which is why there is no way in any hell or heaven that I am going to use it. If you find a fool who will throw $1,000 into my face saying, now you will use World Between Worlds in your story, I will kick him in the balls and shove this $1,000 down his throat so he could choke on them. I hope I made myself clear on this little subject. Okay, next question from Nikos. Oh, hello again, good to see you. Q&A: how would the Jedi react if they found out that the Tau are so weak in the Force they simply can't produce Force sensitives? Usually in Star Wars, even species that are resistant to some Force abilities, like the Hutts or Geonosians, can still produce the odd Force-sensitive individual, with the only exception being species that committed such insane atrocities to the point the Force itself cut them off. I think you might have forgotten that the Jedi discovered the fact that the Tau are basically non-Force sensitives in the very first episode. It was Anakin who found out or discovered that even though they were facing a massive ship, hell, a massive fleet, he couldn't really detect any life signs because of how weak in the Force the Tau are. So sure, it was quite a bit of shock, and the fact that there are no exceptions to that rule would still be confusing to the Jedi. However, you must remember that the Jedi are very much aware that the Tau are not of this galaxy. Sure, being non-Force sensitive to this extent is unheard of, outside of few extremely rare and hard to find examples, but the Tau are from a completely different galaxy, if not from completely different reality. So, sure, weird, but not that shocking looking at the circumstances. Okay, next question from Rayburn5169. Q&A: would your Tauva coalition survive the Old Republic era? Survive? They would thrive. Tauva coalition is far more powerful and far more potent than the Tau Empire. So yeah, they would be fine, more or less. Sure, the age of the Old Republic was a total mess, but it would also be full of opportunities for the coalition. So I think they would be doing fine in this environment, more or less. Okay, next question from Psap950. Oh, hello, one of my more eager supporters. Q&A: how do you think Admiral Trench and the fleet he commanded during the blockade of Christophsis would potentially have influenced this battle? Let's take a look, see? 1 Providence-class Dreadnought, 6 Lucrehulks, oh, that's quite a lot, and 23 Munificent-class frigates. Some hard cells and other ships as well. Well, that's a very formidable fleet. Hell, in terms of firepower and tonnage, this would easily be worth like 1/3 of all fleets gathered above Rune. With Trench's fleet added to the power of the defenders, now they have 19 Lucrehulks, probably over 40 Munificent-class frigates, and a lot more smaller vessels. And that's a gigantic armada. Ludicrous size by Star Wars standards. Hell, if we look at the tonnage, like Lucrehulks being like light cruiser, a more or less class for 40k, and Munificent class frigates being like very small escort class, that's a very big fleet by 40k standards. But answering your question, if that fleet was part of a defense fleet, the Tau would likely send far bigger fleet, which would probably include a battleship or two, despite the threat it would pose during, translation and arriving in system. so expect far more numerous fleet that would be attacking Rune. They would scale it up to match the fleet defending the planet. So the battle will be of far bigger scale, without a doubt. As for the tactics and outcome of the battle, assuming that Trench would be in command. Trench is competent but prideful, but also he is a cautious commander, one who sticks to his mandate. I do not believe he would rush out to meet the Tau in the frontal charge as they arrive in system. He would stick to his mandate of protecting Rune. When confronted with the torpedoes, he would most likely determine that closing the distance or hiding behind asteroid field is the best course of action, far sooner than during the story, so he would probably save and protect far greater part of his fleet and score more kills, but I do not believe that he would be able to stop the Commonwealth fleet. In fact, I think that if given a voice, he would be opposed of sending a fleet to defend strategically unimportant world like Rune, especially a fleet of that ludicrous size. And if given a chance, he would retreat from the battle far sooner, focusing on preserving military assets rather than attempting to stop the Liberation Fleet. Okay, next question from Trigon W1L. Q&A: how would the battle have unfolded if the defenders have advanced the moment the Tau and their allies had arrived in system? Now this is a fun scenario to consider. Let's think. The Commonwealth did arrive in a disjoint manner, but at the same time from an unexpected direction, meaning that if the defenders moved to attack straight away, they wouldn't be doing it in any form of cohesive formation of their own. Not to mention the different command structures, competence of commanders, and the competition between them. The battle will be far more chaotic, no doubt about that, but at the same time, it would also end up with far more casualties on the side of the defenders. Sure, they would score more kills, to be fair, but the Tau would unleash all 3 salvos of torpedoes instead of 2. And remember, 1 torpedo carries enough power to kill Munificent frigate, if it hits. More than that, there will be far more ramming, especially from the kinships, not to mention that of Tarelians. And in terms of ramming, 40k factions win by default, usually, like 9 times out of 10. More than that, the defenders would get the taste of all Commonwealth weapons far sooner, not just torpedoes but ion cannons, rail cannon batteries and pulse accelerators. Not to mention, with some of the Commonwealth ships appearing out of nowhere, it would introduce even more chaos onto the battlefield, with the difference being that the Commonwealth would possess centralized and competent command that could bring back order, while the defenders have no such thing. Add to that the lack of experience and incompetence of some commanders, and the eager frontal charge would transform into a rout in short order, especially when they realize they are out of position and can't use asteroid belt as cover to hide from the Commonwealth firepower. So in short, the defenders would score more kills, no doubt, but would suffer far greater casualties and be routed far quicker. Okay, next question from TN Bluetick 231. Oh, hello again. Q&A: how will the Jedi and the Republic handle the aftermath of their first Genestealer purge? I think the general public would excuse purging a pure Genestealer, but the later generations and those that are infected would be a tough pill for the public to swallow, After all, you have to be through when dealing with the cults. Much would be determined by did any cult manage to grow in size enough to call in a high fleet to consume a planet. If yes, the general public would be far more accepting of a purge, if not, far less. However, and that's also important, remember that the Tau are capable of curing people infected with Genestealer virus. They can't really do much for the later generations, but those who are initially infected, they can save them, more or less. And they did share the way to detect Genestealer DNA and how to cure it with the rest of the galaxy, for obvious reasons. So sure, there would be some outrage and a good amount of shock, but the moment they see a high fleet and are shown that those spaceback monsters are lured to eat planets by those cults, I think that purges would be far more acceptable. There would be a lot of trauma and a lot of questions, but it would be accepted in the end. Okay, next question from Atreides Battle Pug 7544. Q&A: since the Tau will be working with Corellia, will Centerpoint Station become of interest to them? I mean, maybe? Remember that the Centerpoint Station was studied for millennia at this point, and no one figured it out yet. People use the station for, habitation more than a tool or a weapon at this point. So, would the Tau study this mysterious construct? Sure, but you must realize that the Tau are no strangers to finding strange, ancient and incomprehensible space stations abandoned by their builders millennia ago, and then adapting them for their own use. That's nothing special. So, would they study it? Sure. Would they understand its true purpose and potential? Maybe. Would they know how to reactivate it and use it? Doubtful. Okay, next question from Gordo Zinho. Q&A: will we see more of the Abhumans? I feel like there hasn't been much of a reaction towards them. With how many near-humans there are in the Star Wars galaxy, the Abhumans and mutants or WH40k aren't that special. But it's also true that there weren't really that many interactions between people of Star Wars and Abhumans or mutants. So I would ask you for patience in this matter. Okay, next question from Envos3138. Q&A: considering that the Republic and future separatists are watching this battle with great interest, do you see the future of Sky River tech development becoming an issue for the Tau expansion? Considering a future war won't likely be a clones against drones designed to lose. Perhaps a fan with too much time overestimated the Star Wars galaxy tech development. Can't really touch the a fan with too much time line because I honestly do not remember how he presented the idea, how quickly some technologies could be adopted or adapted or developed. Though I do remember that it was a plot point years ago that rearming and redeploying the fleet and the army of the Republic would take too much time. So I don't think he made a mistake there. As for the potential of tech development and of droids used by the future CIS, don't expect things to be that different from canonical Star Wars in this regard. Sure, 5 years is enough to build some new and bigger toys and roll out some fun upgrades for the military, but it also isn't enough time to build something completely new or completely unstoppable. You know the old saying, you start a war with the army you have, not an army you will have in 10 years or an army you wish you had. 5 years is not enough for the future of CIS, the corporations that will form the backbone of their military, to really create that many new droids. And also, do not underestimate the grip the Sith have on different organizations throughout the galaxy. Would the galaxy be more militarized and more advanced by the time of the Clone Wars? Sure, but remember that the Tau won't be idle either. They will advance technology as well, and in many categories of science and technology, they have more than just a little bit of a head start. That, and do not underestimate the sheer inertia of culture and conviction of the core worlds regarding remilitarization and technological progress. Remember that as shocking as some things are, and how dangerous the factions of 40k are, they are stuck in a rather small region of the Outer Rim at this point. A sparsely populated region of the Outer Rim at that. It will take months, if not years, for some factions of a core to take the threat of a Grimdark galaxy seriously, because it's not Adver alone yet. It's, far away. Core ignoring the Outer Rim is nothing new, even if fragment of hell was transported in that place. They will still continue to ignore it. Okay, last question from Brian McClure 2220. Q&A, you said no Space Marines, but how about similar factions like Grey Knights or Custodes? Is it possible any of them could see an appearance? What is the best way to answer this one? Oh, I know. Could you tell me where you live? I mean, just in case of a nuclear war, I would like to know the location of an object dense enough to endure a nuclear explosion. I am sure I could hide in your shadow during the explosion and be fine afterwards. Look, mate, I'm sorry, but you forced me to bring out the grill and roast your ass. What kind of stupid-ass question is that? In how many languages do I need to say no Space Marines before the information reaches you and people like you and is understood? I know that literacy is basically an endangered species in the US at this point, but I'm starting to get worried if the meaning of a three-word sentence is beyond you, mate. Like, if I am this hardline on the concept of Angels of Death ever appearing in the story, this might suggest that I'm against any Imperial super soldier appearing. Just maybe. Maybe. Those bastards have more than enough screen time in other stories and steal the spotlight in almost any story they show up, which is why I refuse to use them by principle. The Imperium of Man has more than enough fun factions to play with, many of which do not get proper recognition, and I intend to give them proper spotlight, to give them screen time they deserve. And if any of you can't handle the fact that there will be no Space Marines, no Grey Knights, no Custodes, no Primarchs, and if you could guess, the Emperor of Mankind won't show up either. I know, shocking. No one could figure that one out, apparently. Then probably this isn't a story for you. I hope that this answer was direct and easy enough for you to understand. If not, expect to be ignored or go from roasted to charred the next time you ask such stupid-ass question. I swear, some people, you can't just satisfy them. You just can't. They hear no Space Marines and they lose their fucking mind. Let's just ignore that there are orcs, there might be Tyranids, there might be Genestealers. Hell, the very concept of what will happen with the Chaos cults that were transported to the Star Wars galaxy, that's fun. But no, some people just need big, strong, giant super soldiers. Can't handle the story that lacks a 8-foot-tall muscle daddy. What a joke. That will be all for today's Q&A. Your homebrews will be next, and after that I move back to the Battle of Rune and continuation of it. Until then, stay tuned and stay safe out there.